I'm a computer guy. I work over in Silicon Valley.
I'm a doula.
We were in Boulder Creek in the Acorns. We lived there 17 years. We lost our last house in a house fire.
And we rebuilt it from the ground up.
It was pretty dreamy. We designed it. We got to lay out everything internally the way that we wanted. It had almost everything we wanted in it.
We've lived in the valley for 40 years, since Halloween night 1980.
We lived in that house for 37 years. We bought it out of foreclosure. It was a mess. Yellow shag carpet and all of the, avocado green appliances. Yeah. Broken skylights and mushrooms. We retiled the kitchen once, and then we remodeled it. We remodeled both bathrooms and put in hardwood floors.
We redid the deck.
And added some sheds in the carport.
There was a second house on the property. We put that in 16, 17 years ago. We just put $20,000 into that.
We totally put in new floors in the bedrooms and remodeled a shed for Dana's office and built another shed out the side of the house. So they were just all set. Dana is our son and his wife, Amber, and then they got a dog, and then they got a little girl, and then they got a little boy, and we're safe, and there's COVID, and we're just counting our blessings every day, how lucky we were.
It was winter of 2005 into 2006. That's when I started working at Big Basin. But I lived in a variety of places over the years. At one point, my brother had a trailer that he wasn't using much, and he gave me a sister discount. So I would live 3-4 nights a week up at Big Basin in that trailer. So one of the camp posts said they had this 40-foot trailer. This was at Sky Meadow in Big Basin. It was a very quiet area, but I really loved it. And it was a little higher elevation, so there was a mixture of redwoods, firs, and oaks, and all sorts of things up there.
We lived on Big Basin Way, near the park. The north side of my home was leveled with the ground. I only had to walk out the front door to walk on the duff of the redwood trees. The house was built into a hillside. The beams of the main floor were cantilevered out beyond the house to create a balcony that was roofed with clear polycarbonate, a place for respite, for observation of wildlife, and for outdoor undercover clothes drying.
Yeah, I moved here from China. I came in 1997 from Sichuan in the mainland China. Yeah, and then I moved to Boulder Creek from the Santa Cruz in the 2007 to open the restaurant. And then I bought my house on the Fern Rock Way. Yeah. And I did a lot of work like the new fence and the new roof. Yeah.
I lived in Boulder Creek for 45 years, since I was 6 months old, my whole life. And then when I was 19, I bought a house on Bear Creek Road. Instead of going to college, I bought a house.
We actually moved the December before the fire up to Braymore, up in Bonnie Doon.
We planned to be there for a long time. My sister and brother-in-law, they live with us, and that house had sort of an in-law unit in it with a mini kitchen and a sort of bedroom and stuff, and so it was a really good setup for us. It had good outdoor space and a lot of indoor space.
We settled into the house pretty quickly. The neighborhood was really nice, and it definitely felt like home very quickly, and we're doing a lot of stuff to sort of set us up for the long term. And we're rebuilding the deck and doing all these things to make it fit us really well.
Somewhere around the wee hours of the 16th, the storm was coming through San Lorenzo Valley pretty hard. I'll never forget it. I woke up at around 4:30 a.m. to lightning, thunder, and my phone and pager going off, alerting me to an incident and requesting me specifically. It was about 2 miles outside of town. When I got there, We found the fire below a house. We went direct on the fire and were able to contain it.
We got woken up from the lightning storm. That was Saturday night, early Sunday morning. My fiance kept trying to wake us up to look at it. I'm like, leave me alone, I'm trying to sleep here. And then the next day, it was super smoky. So we knew there was a fire.
I think after the lightning, we woke up that morning and we saw the smoke. And so we're, being already fire survivors, we're sensitive to that kind of thing. And so we immediately did the research and figured out where it was. And we were like, okay, the wind's not too bad right now, and it's moving really slow, but the smoke was really bothering us. So we decided, after a couple of hours, we decided just to get out of the house and go up the coast to get out of the smoke.
And we had to go kind of far.
Yeah, up quite a ways. And we ended up driving right past the fire. It was right there on 1. And that was a little weird. And then we spent the day at the beach and came home.
I looked off the ridge. We were on the edge of a bluff, and I could see lightning hitting the ridges in all directions. We would see a lightning strike, and then a column of smoke rise up.
I got up in the middle of the night. We were low on sleep after 3 days of hot weather, and then that lightning storm at 3 in the morning. I'm like, what is going on? I went up there in my underwear, and it was blowing like crazy and just flashes all over the place. And here's Monday morning, and we'd had that windstorm that knocked out our power, so we were without power for 3 days. So we didn't even know about the fire because we had no Comcast, no telephone, no anything. Monday was a beautiful day, and we got our power back. And then on Tuesday, everything started getting really smoky. But we went to bed anyway.
I was probably awake all night because we just don't get those kinds of lightning storms that harken for me back to when I was a kid. Sunday morning is when they started seeing all these smoke plumes. But because of the overhanging smoke from fires all around the state, it was really hard to see what was going on. But they could tell it was somewhere near Berry Creek Falls, and that's when we started closing down some of the different trails. And then Monday, there were lots of fires and things starting to happen.
Then we were dispatched to North China Grade Road, and when we got up there, we saw multiple columns of smoke coming up from the ridges. We called for backup, and we were told that there were no resources coming. We were able to do fire attack and officially get containment. It took overnight and into the next morning, which was Monday the 17th. At this point, I thought the threat to Boulder Creek's fire district was mitigated.
So when I got off work at 5 or something, it was weird, coughing. And I said, let's just go down to the beach. I need some cool and fresh air. So we got our 2 dogs, went down and got Mary Ann's ice cream. We went all the way down to Aptos and then parked outside Seacliff State Beach.
Yeah, I heard the storm, but it didn't sink in. Yeah, I didn't think it would be so serious and to burn my house.
When the lightning storm went on that caused the fires, I remember Andy was up and he was reminiscing about the thunderstorms in Illinois because there's not very big thunderstorms here. So I'm a psychologist, and on Tuesday I signed off with my last client, and the email list had just been going off all day about whether or not people were going to need to evacuate. And just from the discussion and the people on there, I was pretty convinced that we were probably going to be told to evacuate, even if it was just precautionary.
That Tuesday, midday, we got called out to an unknown type of fire at Crow's Nest and Tradewinds on the top of East Hilton. So I raced up the hill and met with the Redwood Empire representative. He took me down the ridge a bit, maybe a mile in, and showed me a spot fire that had burned out a 10-foot by 10-foot area. He'd already put it out, so I called CAL FIRE and a prevention officer came out. He was hoping like heck that it wasn't a spot fire, but he came to the same conclusion I did. He agreed to notify someone from his agency, and just then we watched as a glowing, smoldering rat's nest landed right in front of us. I turned to the CAL FIRE officer and said, "How close is the closest fire?" He replied, "Oh, it's miles from here." Turns out, That spot fire was started by a fire that was 6 miles away. I remember being outside the station and seeing our flag blowing towards the east, and I just knew that fire was headed right for us. The 236 corridor was especially dangerous between the wind and the terrain. That fire was going to get pushed right down the mountain. By Tuesday night, I started calling all fire personnel to come into the station. I told them that we were going to be impacted by a fire, and I didn't know when it was going to hit the district, nor how big it was going to be. But I had made the decision to evacuate all residents. Once I returned to the station, the first thing I did was review our evacuation maps. I decided that we needed to release a fire evacuation order. Not a warning, but an order. We would typically issue a warning first to allow residents time to collect their things and make their plans, but my experience with fires in heavy timber like this is that it can pick up a head of steam and really get going. If I had not made that decision then, we would have had hundreds of people still in that 236 drainage route. From the moment I pulled that order until the moment that fire hit, when we look at the fire modeling and progression, there's no way we could have gotten the people out in time. There were some residences that were impacted within a few hours.
On the evening of August 18th, we were about to sit down to what was to be our last supper at our home in Boulder Creek before the fires struck our area, when our neighbor Peter called and told us there was an evacuation order. I insisted we eat since it was on the table, and I knew that healthy food had a calming effect. After supper, we packed our pets, personal documents, computers, suitcases, and camping gear into the car to head to my office in downtown Boulder Creek. I thought it would be overnight, just a fire drill.
We had all just finished eating, which was kind of handy that we were all nice and fed. And we were watching something on TV, and I was just fooling around on Facebook. And I started noticing people saying things like, "I'm packing a bag just in case," or "I'm gonna go ahead and leave." And I looked at him and I was like, people are getting ready to leave. My friend Cheryl texted me and said that people at the golf course were evacuating, and that's not far from the Acorns. So I looked at him again and was like, people at the golf course are evacuating. And I was in disbelief because we had just seen the fire and it was like way down the coast. And I was like, what is going on? And Matt was just like, well, do you want to pack? And I was like, no. But of course, we both just jumped up
And she got the kids ready.
I immediately packed clothes for a few nights and got food for the dogs and packed our masks and our hand sanitizer.
We were joking afterwards that I was evacuating and she was packing for a picnic.
I packed for just a few days, whereas he packed as if the house wasn't going to be there.
My dad lives on the top of Highway 236, across from Little Basin Road, and my house was being remodeled. So all my personal belongings were at my dad's house. And he has a motorcycle shop, and I'm a dirt bike trainer. So all my motorcycle stuff is in the shop at his house. And there's a dirt bike museum there too. At like 4 p.m., I got a text message from my brother. It says, we're being evacuated to get up to the house and get your stuff out. So we went up, me, Ben, my fiance. So by the time I got up there were already big oak leaves coming down, the big black leaves. So this is serious. So I put like 20 motorcycles up in the big field that I have there, and I loaded 6 or 8 bikes in the back of a trailer. And then, evacuated the family to Santa Cruz and everything like that.
I was trying to figure out, looking at the sky and trying to smell the air and figure out what was going on. And so I was up at 5:30 in the morning, and this was days after the lightning strikes, right? And the police came driving up the driveway and said, time to go. And that was the first we heard there was an evacuation. They said, time to pack up and go, we won't be back again. And so, okay, you're exhausted. It's 5:30 in the morning, and you're thinking, you have images of the campfire in paradise which came on so fast. Anybody who treated it like a normal fire maybe didn't make it. Amber had the kids and they were scared and we all wanted to stay together, and so first thing is, okay, hopefully we'll be back, but what papers did we absolutely have to have, you know?
One thing I did, I grabbed, well, from the last fire, I had a bag of photos and things. And then my sister had sent some family pictures that were in a suitcase that I had stored. So I pulled that out, and I pulled this bag out. And then on my way to do something, I grabbed my squash blossom that I have in a frame. I grabbed my dad's World War II photos and his radio certificates from when he was in the service. So I have those, and the Japanese boxes that my uncle, it was in my family for years.
There were some things that would have been just unbearable to lose, and I grabbed 9 miniature totem poles from the early 1900s that I couldn't imagine losing, that I just would have been crushed to lose. And I put them in a box, and I did grab that box. And there was other stuff on the table that I could have easily grabbed and put in the same box, but first of all, you're exhausted. It's 5:30 in the morning, and you're trying to figure this out.
We would have had a lot of help if we knew we needed it. We just didn't know.
We went up Alba Road and down whatever grade into Santa Cruz.
Anyway, we're scrolling and I'm starting to see this stuff about evacuation. At the same time that my next door neighbor, another interpreter, texted me and said, "You know, we're evacuating now. Is there anything I can get you out of your trailer?" So Dennis and I are just like, the cats, you know? Well, no, we have to go back. And you know how long a drive it is at 6:30 at night in the summer from Aptos to Big Basin? And we made it in record time. So we get to Sky Meadow Road, you know, the one that goes past Sempervirens Falls, and get all the way up there and screech to a halt in front of the trailer. And I hear that you've got to leave. And we're like, well, we're just getting our cats. I run in and I find one cat and drag it out from behind the couch. And Dennis finds another one in the bedroom and hands it to me. And then I grab a bag of some bizarre clothes and some bathroom stuff. And I guess maybe even a coffee cup, because I'm thinking, okay, we're gonna be gone for one night, you know, probably at the motel. We have a box of important papers, and there's this big metal shed, and he's grabbing that.
So as soon as I was done with my workday, that's when I went around and made sure we had 2 full outfits for all the kids and a week's worth of socks and underwear, all the things they needed for connecting to school. And then we grabbed our chuppah and our ketubah and all of the prayer shawls, at least the ones on the Judaica shelf.
I was grumpy about the whole situation. At some level, I was in denial that it would actually hit our house. Yeah, obviously, it's good that I listened to her in this situation.
Yeah, it's crazy, the things that you don't think about in the moment. I had a box full of correspondence between my grandparents from World War II that I wish I had grabbed.
When we evacuated our house, I, for whatever reason, kind of expected the best. If I had known that our house was going to get caught in the fire and burned down, we probably would have brought more stuff.
I took mostly things that were more important to me and had a lot of sentimental value. There was a book that I brought that I'd had for a long while that Mom had a copy of when she was little. And one story in it had a picture that kind of made me think of her in some way.
It's a storybook. It's from a collection from the 1920s. My grandmother read to my dad from it, and my dad read to me, and I read it to them. And Hadassah grabbed the book that had my favorite story in it. I was getting a lot of flack at the time for wanting to leave before the official order that we had to leave. And I almost grabbed my wedding dress, and I decided not to because I thought I was being ridiculous. I was like, oh, our house is probably going to be fine. This is probably just a precaution. We'll probably only be out of here for a couple days. The fire will pass us by and then we'll be back.
As a customer, they told me about the evacuation. And I was working at the restaurant, so then I went home. And I thought maybe the fire it doesn't burn my house, so then I didn't pack. But I thought maybe it would be like a temporary, right? And I would stay at the hotel for maybe 1 day or so. Yeah, I didn't take any clothes. I didn't take anything. The precious photo album. It's my fault. So I thought the fire, it never burned my house so far. My new passport, and I didn't take my documents.
We evacuated some people along Highway 236 down toward the east and then south on Highway 9. The other Highway 236 residents were evacuated toward the coast. Residents who live on Highway 9 north of Bear Creek Road were sent out toward Santa Clara, and residents on Bear Creek Road were diverted out toward Highway 17. And the last group, which includes the business district and residents down to Brookdale, was sent south on Highway 9 toward Santa Cruz. By sending everyone in different directions and evacuating residents from top to bottom all on the same night, we kept residents moving safely without plugging up routes.
By 9 p.m., we were driving down our road. As we turned onto Highway 236, about a mile from home, we saw this small brush fire on the side of the road, likely from a fallen ash. Initially, Steve thought he should attempt to put it out, but within a minute of our passing, that spot had torched up into a tree and spread. After getting an okay from the BC Fire Department to stay at Burrell Business Center, where my office is located, we took sleeping bags and bedding onto the floor of my office. And as we were settling in, Steve called me to the entryway of the building. We were on the second floor looking out of a double glass door. The view overlooks the town center and the ridges of forest that move 7 miles up the hill toward our neighborhood and Big Basin Redwood State Park. Steve pointed out to me the glow at the top of the ridges. He said, "That's where our property's located." It looked to me like a sunset, but it was 11 p.m. Even with that visual, it didn't occur to me that our home was burning down. We willingly evacuated, but at this time, we still considered the event as a fire drill. Around 5 a.m. the next day, August 19th, we checked in with the fire department and we were told we needed to evacuate from downtown. So we packed up, headed for Santa Cruz. By 1 p.m., we were checking into Ocean Lodge, which became our residence for the next 9 days.
The smoke was thick and it was getting hot and everyone was just getting antsy. And so I was the one that turned to him and said, "Hey, everything's gonna be okay. Like, we can just go now." And so we stopped packing and we all got in the cars and we left at that point.
There were embers falling on the ground, so it was definitely time to go. And when we got to town was packed. And there's this huge line at the gas station and their fire trucks were going by. And that's when we got the call on our cell phone, the alert to evacuate.
Yeah, as we were packing, I texted my mother-in-law in San Jose and asked if we could come. And she said, of course. And so we were just heading to San Jose.
She's got a huge open heart.
And so meanwhile, the Rangers are coming by and I finally said, "Well, where's the fire?" And he said, "Right there." And I finally turned my head and looked toward 2 houses across the street and there are flames. I mean, right there. And they're trying to put it out for maybe 50 yards. Like flames. And what had happened was the Rangers, that's the first place they started trying to fight it. And they're just heroic that they're out there. And they have their little water backpacks, and some tools. and they're trying to fight it some. And they finally realize, as they see these flames are going from treetop to treetop, they've got to get out of there. And so as they left, though, they ran into some CAL FIRE, and one of the rangers went back with them up there, and even CAL FIRE said, no, gotta go. And so we leave heading out of there, orange sky, and then race down 236. I had thought, if only I'd got my computer, 20 years of stuff that I collected. But I would have had to make a right turn into Big Basin instead of a left turn. And of course, you don't do that. And I'm on the phone trying to figure out where we could stay. And we've got the dogs. So we finally said, let's just get out of the area because everybody's evacuating. Let's go to Monterey. Well, it turns out we went from fire to where there was also a fire in Monterey. So we got there, and you know, we don't know what's going on. COVID went from the dominant problem to like very secondary at that point.
I was watching online. You could keep an eye on the map of where the fire was. I was sort of watching that. Didn't seem that close at the time, but I guess it moves pretty quickly.
I remember explaining to Hadassah and I think Danny that they didn't need to be too worried, that we were evacuating. It's probably a precaution, so we were all going to be safe. And we went to my parents' house down in Morgan Hill because we needed somewhere where the dogs could be. So the dogs stayed there and we stayed at a hotel in Morgan Hill so that we could be kind of near.
Oh yeah, but that day I got my animal. Yeah, and I got my dog and my 2 cats, and yeah, that's all. I cannot leave them, right? And my dog Ginger, yeah, she makes me the most happy. So yeah, I take them with me to the hotel, and yeah, my 2 cats are under the bed. It was very hard to find the hotel to take the animals, and yeah, they overcharge me.
We went down to the CAL FIRE Command Center together to find out what resources we had on the way, what was known about the fire, hoping to hear that help was on the way. What I found out was that they were already stretched thin and had very limited resources available. CAL FIRE had sent some help into our area, and I was glad for that, but it was not the level of assistance we required. I inquired about air support and was told that none was available that evening, and they weren't sure if anybody would be available the next day. I left them to figure out their plan and returned to Boulder Creek. My friend and I headed to the top of the ridge and tried to scout it out ourselves and determine how close it was. And before we even got to the edge of our district on the western side, you could see the glow on the mountain along Upper China Grade Road and see the direction the smoke was headed, straight down 236. The embers were coming right down that gully, and from there, it was off to the races. We spread out everywhere we could to try to put out spot fires and control the spread. There were sheriff's officers who were stationed along our roads and were calling all clear for residences.
And then I felt like I couldn't stay at the campground in Santa Cruz. And so I got on a motorcycle and I drove back up to my dad's property. This is probably 9 o'clock, maybe 8 o'clock Tuesday night. So I'm coming up 236 and I had to go through all the fire chiefs and all that. And then I had to cross Lodge Road. The fire had already crossed the road, so I had to go through the fire to even get to the house, which was kind of surreal at the time. And then when I was going up the driveway, I could see it glowing already and I could feel the heat that's coming up the driveway. And when I got up to the top of the driveway, probably 100 yards past the house, I can already see the fire was advancing. And at that point, it's coming out of Big Basin State Park. So it was a crown fire. It was jumping from tree to tree to tree. I mean, it was really, really intense. I could hear it coming out of the canyon. Like a big turbine engine. I could feel the air just sucking into the canyon. It was intense. And like Eagle Rock, flames were 60 feet high, and there's a pine mountain and Buzzard's Roost. Yeah, those are all just pine and stuff was just burning. I mean, it was intense. So basically when it hit my dad's, 1, 2, 3. 3 signs.
It was all a blur after that. The fire came over the mountain and overran us several times. We would get into one neighborhood and save 10 homes but lose 2. And then in another neighborhood, we'd lose 6 and save 1. We started to pull back down to town to regroup. We were becoming exhausted and we needed to resupply our engines with water. We basically fought it all the way down the 236 drainage and down West Park and the ridge coming off of Braemore Drive down to the back of town. The smoke was so thick in town that you couldn't see Johnny's supermarket across the street. The air was like chewing on it, it was so thick. And there were embers blowing through town like a snowdrift. I called a big strategic briefing for all of our staff. What I was about to ask them to do was going to be worse than anything anybody had ever asked of them, and the danger was going to be higher than anything that they'd ever dreamed of signing up for. I had to lay it out to them very, very clear, very matter of fact, what the survivability rates of us staying were. They knew that they were all getting told, you could leave right now. You could get up and walk out of here. Nobody would think any less of you. Doesn't matter if you're scared out of your mind right now, because we're all scared. I made it very clear that they were all volunteers, they weren't paid to stay, I didn't want anybody to die or anybody get injured, and we're not going to die for dirt or for structures. All the people were evacuated. We're just leaving structures. And the reaction was complete opposite of what I thought. I thought I was going to have maybe, a few troops left behind. I mean, I know who I have. I have some amazing people. But every one of them said, we're not leaving if you're not leaving. Every one of them. They went outside, they emptied their stomachs, they might have had sweaty eyeballs, but they mustered right back up.
There's no power, there's no water, so I was pretty helpless. I was by myself. So I pulled out a chainsaw and I started cutting whatever trees and limbs I could around from the houses and the museums and the garage. I went down to Highway 236 at Little Basin, and there was a bunch of fire trucks and CDF, and I tried to plead with them to come up and help me, but at that point, they were pulling out of the park, and they're more into pull-out mode than they were in fighting fire mode. Because it was a danger. I mean, it was a crown fire. They were overwhelmed. I ended up getting one guy, one truck to come up, and they helped me. They soaked the museum. At this point, when they came up, the garage was already on fire, and the house was just catching on fire. And we put all our effort into saving the museum since that was the only thing that hadn't caught on fire yet. So we cut everything down around it. And then they actually backburned a little bit into the fire that was already coming to burn the fuel before it got to the museum. And at that point, I was just in civilian clothes. So it got too hot for me. So I just got on my motorcycle, said my last words, and rode off, as the place was on fire. That's where I grew up.
As the fire front was coming, it was moving in different directions and blowing in very fast. It would move through one neighborhood and we'd have to remove ourselves due to the heat and the extreme nature of it, and then we'd dive right back in after it passed through. We were putting out fires behind houses and on houses, and then chasing it to the next home where we'd battle it again, and we would just, I don't know how many hours straight we went. At the beginning, our crew was running 24-hour shifts with 1 to 3 hour naps in between, and we did that for about 72 hours. Just fighting the adrenaline and stress made sleep challenging, and no one wants to fight fire in their own hometown. We would fight fire all day, and then every evening it would come back in hard and push down the mountain just like clockwork. All day it would blow east toward town, and between 6 p.m. and 8 p.m. the wind would carry it southeast down the 236 drainage area, and we'd watch the sparks and embers blow off and start a spot fire, and then another spot fire, and another one. And then it would continue to travel down the ridge toward town. That happened 4 nights in a row, where it would threaten, and then it would die down at the last minute. It was crazy. The only thing that gave me the calm and clarity to create a plan and work the fire was that we were going to hold town no matter what. We had a primary plan, we had a backup plan, we had a contingency plan, and we had an emergency plan. It was a fight.
Next day, same thing. I woke up and everyone's talking and hooting and hollering at the campground in Santa Cruz. You know, this is not for me. People are sitting at the KOA campground, drinking beer, telling stories while everything we own is burning. So I didn't really think that was a good story time. Drinking and enjoying my lifetime, you know, right? It's a little more serious than that, in my mind. I went back up the next morning to go to the property to see either the damage that was done or if I could rescue anything on the property. And when I got there, I was surprised to see that the museum hadn't burned yet, but everything else was burned. The bikes in the field did fine. I wish I had put everything in the field. My father lived there for 45 years. He built the house. He hand built the house.
Yeah, seems likely the fire that took our house was started by a backfire went wrong, not the actual fire. There's a lot of word about that from reliable people, people I've actually talked to, people who were there. The guy who drilled my new well was up there working to save houses. He never left and saved a bunch of houses with his equipment. He dug fire breaks and he had water cannons. And he said kind of late in the game, this crew came up for CAL FIRE that was going to help out on the ground, and they were freaked out. And they had just come from the Upper Alba area where they'd participated in an effort to start a backfire, and they just said it went wrong. And they were scared, and they had to drive through a wall of flames to even escape, so they were freaked out. And I ran this story by a young man who was working on a crew up there, and I told him this, and he said, "That's right, I was there."
And so from there on out, I decided I was going to come down here to West Park because the fire was coming down the hills already. It already had burned up Jameson and Falling Leaf. So I rode my bike down to the West Park house and I set up camp and I rode my bike up Ridge. The fire was coming off of Ridge and coming down into West Park. And my thought was, well, if one house catches on fire, then it has a chance of my house catching on fire. They're all going to catch on fire. So from there, I just started cutting fire lines. And I spent all night cutting fire lines behind these houses right here. And then I went up Ridge and I cut fire lines around Ridge. I'm making the breaks a foot, 2 feet wide. That's all it took. It didn't take much because it was mostly creeping along. And when I was cutting the lines around Ridge, I was super stoked because I saw 3 CDF come walking up. And I was like, oh, I'm saved. I got help. Oh, hey guys, get some water up here. The fire's coming down right now. And they looked at me, laughing at me, like, water? And I look at them, like, you guys just have shovel and McLeods like I do. Like, that's all we have. And like, this is gonna be a long night. We have 3 dudes with shovels, McLeods, and me with a shovel and McLeod. And that was it. That was it. First night was just pretty much by myself. I'd never fought a fire before. It was moving slow. You know, I'd roasted a lot of marshmallows, so I wasn't that scared. I went from non-experienced to chief in one night.
It got within a block of town up West Park. It was just a block behind Scopazzi's, and it burned down to the church on Highway 9, including the town graveyard. It burned south for a while along 9, and then went back up the mountain. As the days went on, we started to get more resources from CAL FIRE and out of various strike teams, but it was a few days into the incident. It was one of those cliche moments where we said, come hell or high water, we're holding town and we're holding our school. If you don't have a town, people aren't going to rebuild. If you lose homes, that's terrible. But if you lose your whole town, people are pretty unlikely to build back. And if you lose your school, it's hard to get folks to come back and start over. None of our volunteers once said they needed to go back to check on their own homes, not once. We all knew that we were going to do what we could to save town and not worry about ours. We were prepared for the fight.
So the next morning, we went into Monterey to a Starbucks and we're having some coffee, and my phone rings and it's my boss, and she's like, hi, it's Elizabeth, and just sorry to tell you, but everything's been lost. Everything. Until then, just some kind of hope, right? We just figured that between the sprinkler, because it's Big Basin, he's been watering the lawn for ages, you know, there's pretty good fire clearance, that it would be okay. But right then is where just everything went topsy-turvy. People had gone in and started surveying, and that's when they found out how all but one house had burned. All structures, all of Big Basin. You know, headquarters, museum, lodge, lodge store, campfire center, pretty much every bathroom, just every building, office, trail crew, tool shed, everything.
Yeah, on August 20th, my neighbor told me that my house has burned down. Yeah, and yeah, I watched, and then I saw that there's one house that the fire has burned, but my house is still there. Yeah, so then I watch, and then 4:30 and 6:30, and I text and ask the neighbor, is your house still good? Your house is still okay, and yeah, I'm so happy, and then 8 o'clock, and then all is gone. And yeah, they told me that my house burned down, and yeah, I don't believe it. And I said, no, I don't believe it. But yeah, later, then yeah, I found that it's true. And yeah, I'm so heartbroken. Yeah, that 8 o'clock on the August 20th, the Thursday, and 24 houses on the fallen leaf. It's the worst thing that I ever saw.
August 19, reverse 911. Evacuated, 8:19. House burned down on 20th. My next entry is 10:16. I wish I could fill in the blanks.
We searched for information for days and days.
We were on Ben Lomond Neighbors and Boulder Creek Neighbors, the local stuff. We didn't know for sure for quite a while, maybe a week and a half. We were in limbo for days. And then Amber's friend Annie knows a police officer, and she asked him to drive up there. So we went up, and he took videos of our house and Dana's house, and that's when we knew for sure.
She just broke down and cried because she was holding out hope. My son Dana and I thought it was most likely gone, but the ladies had more hope, especially Amber.
What did we do when we saw the video and knew for sure the house was gone? I threw up. We were talking to my sister about it. I was sick to my stomach. It's still hard.
We were evacuated Tuesday night. The house burned down Wednesday, and we found out Thursday. Yeah, one of our neighbors had been up there. I asked them specifically about our house, and they replied to me, and they were like, I am so sorry. It's completely gone. And it was really ridiculous because even then I still thought I was going to hear that my house was just fine. And then the text came through, and I was like, oh my God, my house burned down. I kept going with the group I was leading because what am I going to do? Be like, I'm sorry, you guys, you can't have group. I'm going to do what because my house burned down? There's nothing I could really do about it. So I messaged Andy, and we told the kids later when we were all together.
I'm at a Series A startup, So, you know, there's always a lot of work to do. And we were in the middle of a, you know, pretty big push to get some stuff done. But I very much used that as a way to focus on something else as well, especially like after we learned that the house was gone, and I sort of like threw myself into work so that I could not focus on all that.
We barely saw him. The kids were back in the hotel room, and I told them that we had news about the house and that the fire had gone through the area and burned the house down and everything in it, and that we had insurance, so we were going to rebuild the house, which I thought then.
I believe the first thing I said in response was, well, shit. It felt a bit unreal. Yet the thing that made me the most sad was realizing that my teddy bear was gone. I had a teddy bear that used to belong to my mom, and so I just really liked him, and I brought him around before. I brought him on planes, and so I felt kind of bad that I didn't bring him with me this time, and perhaps I should have done that. It's always annoying when you expect your life to go one way, and then something crazy happens.
I felt kind of like my stomach disappeared. It just felt kind of hollow and deep. And I went into a closet that had a sliding mirror door thing and shut the door and sat there and thought about it. I thought a lot about the things that I didn't grab, like, what don't I have anymore?
And honestly, I kept thinking that, okay, there are things that are lost, but we're all still here, and we have what I thought at the time was good insurance. And I was like, all right, we'll be able to rebuild. I tend to be really optimistic and focus on the positive of things. And I was thinking we'll rebuild, and maybe we'll change a couple of things about the layout of the house and make it more ideal for us, and everything will be fine. And even with every step of the way, because I was the point person that was talking to insurance, each time I met with them, I'm thinking, I'm going to provide them with this information. They're going to see this, and they're going to fix it, and it's going to be fine. It was not fine.
I got on my bike the second night or third night, and I cleaned that whole entire road by Gordon Rudy's place. I cut a fire break. The whole entire thing was just a rake. So the fire wouldn't come down into Highway 9 and hit Boulder Creek. I won't say it saved the town. I'd say it saved West Park, or the north part of town. Definitely saved the north part of town.
Some of those guys cut fire lines behind homes and moved wood piles away from houses. It would be impressive to count how many homes they saved. The numbers would be staggering.
I would say I probably directly saved at least 8 houses minimum, if not more. I'd say more. I don't know, it's hard to say. But saying 8 is by saying the fire coming at me and cutting fire lines. I got on the phone, my brother Patrick Garahan came out, my tenant Ron Easley came out, and then a bunch of other people came out. At one time, we probably had 8 to 10 man crew, all Boulder Creek guys. They had all been evacuated. They all figured out a way back in. So basically, the first day or two they were here and we were patrolling Highway 236. We went up to Brook, we saved a place on Brook, we saved a couple places on top of Golf Course, and a couple places on Moon Drive. But after a few days, we started getting a lot of problems with the police officers and the CDF. So pretty much we kind of got locked down and we had to stay just kind of in our neighborhood on West Park. I eradicated fires for 4 or 5 days, and then after that, the 5th day, CDF had come in, and there was nothing really for me to do anymore fire-wise. And then from there, I went to helping out feeding animals for probably 3 or 4 days. The other thing I did, starting a few days after everyone evacuated, was I rode my bike down a bunch of streets in the area, filming as I went along. Then I posted the video on my Facebook page so that people could see what was happening with their neighborhood and their houses.
Meanwhile, Steve was on his computer checking on the fire. He read on Upper Big Basin Boulder Creek neighbors that our neighbor Patrick had returned to our road. and his wife posted that our home had burned to the ground. We were in shock. Steve felt he had to see for himself. So, with numerous concerns coming from my high level of anxiety, he left. He took photos of our vacant land and of 4 neighbors' properties that had been destroyed. He came back to our hotel room smelling like a chimney sweep.
So the 24th is when we found out that our house was gone. It was terrifying waiting to find out what happened to our house. So what did I write? I said, I'm so overwhelmed right now. I'm trying to balance brave facing with showing just enough pain that they know I'm right there with them. What do we do if our house does burn down? And then I wrote, this broke me last time.
And then we got confirmation, got video of ours. His cousin knows somebody who works for ABC News, and they were up there taking video, and so she contacted him and he sent her the video, and yeah, it was literally our property. It was really shocking. It was already gone.
I'm really super proud of all the firefighters. They saved the rest of the neighborhood. The fire stopped at our property line. It burned through our neighbor's house and then through ours and then stopped because they held it back right there. So the CZU fire is what got us, and the LNU fire was up near the Livermore area, and the evacuation zone for that one was about 1.5 miles away from my mom's house. And we were trapped by the smoke on both sides. And then up north, there was the other fire. So there was just smoke everywhere, and our anxiety was super, super high. We were having a hard time being calm. We went to Eugene, because there was nothing available nearby. But we were all just going north, right? Mm-hmm. We just kind of went along 5 and looked for places on Airbnb.
Yeah, we found another Airbnb further north in Oregon, in Molino. And we got it for a whole month, and we were like, okay, well, this will just be nice to be away from all the smoke and just have time to figure out what we want to do next. But we were only in Molino for 1.5 weeks, and then Oregon caught on fire.
So it was no more than 1.5 miles, 2 miles from our house was a fire.
We stayed up till 4 in the morning.
And then another fire popped up like 2.5 miles to the east. The first one was to the west. And as we're evacuating, the smoke was so thick and it was dark. And it was like in the movies, when it's dark on one half of the screen and blue skies on the other half.
When we finally got out of the smoke, every time you looked in the rearview mirror, it was like that black circle is getting bigger and bigger. It was wild.
Yeah, it definitely felt unreal, like we were in a movie. Every time we gave people updates, they would tell us that we should be writing it down for a script.
So I had a friend who lived on Whidbey Island near Seattle, and she found us this rental here.
Yeah, we just kept wanting to go north. You know, it's further from the smoke and cooler and wetter as you went north. So all those things felt better, and we just kept going. It felt like we were being chased. It was pretty intense.
So my friend found a place on Whidbey, and the people who are renting this house to us are amazing. They just let us show up with no talk of money, no contract, without meeting us first, with all of our pets and everything.
And they met us here just long enough to give us the keys and show us where stuff was. They bought us a coffee maker, food and flowers, plants for the house.
They had cookies for the kids and a dog bed for the dog, and they got us some hand towels and stuff.
Yeah, it was super touching.
The kids normally get along with each other really well. The amount of bickering that happened since the fire has just gone up between everybody. And everybody's just had shorter fuses and gotten more upset over smaller things. Like one weird little thing goes wrong and people be like, oh, the whole world is ending. Everything is awful. It was really pretty crazy. We put a lot of effort into trying to make sure that we are all recognizing the bright side of things. We have a lot of board game playing and dance parties and sibling slumber parties in the living room.
That Sunday, there was a sense of normalcy. Having company, walking along the ocean on West Cliff Drive. But that night, we were abruptly awakened by a loud knocking on the door and a voice demanding, "Let me in, I have a package for you. If you don't open up, you'll regret it." Time to find a safer place. As the reality of not going home to our own land really settled into both of us. So, we found an apartment that I wanted to lease. But then we had the worst disagreement of our 35 years of marriage, raising our voices, pounding fists on the table. I was set in my point of view. I am going to rent this apartment. I signed the lease on my own. Steve signed the lease 10 days later.
And Dennis and I had gone into emergency mode. Where are we going to live? What are we going to do? It was so confusing. We just had no clue. We just weren't sure what to do. And Dennis now learned that Little Basin is completely burned, so he's lost his job. I've lost my identity with the place, and that still brings up huge emotions. It's the hardest of all. So at that point, it was our second night at the motel, and then Dennis's boss was a member of a church, and she said, "We have a huge church with one in Scotts Valley, and please come, you shouldn't be in a motel." So we went to this church and stayed there for probably 10 days.
When I went back to look at the house, and I went by myself. So I waited for the police to say okay, and when I saw it, I feel so sad, and it's very stressful. But I be strong. And at this time, it's been a long time. At the beginning, I was not strong. I'm surprised, I'm crying, my house is burned, and I don't realize that I would lost everything,
What was it like seeing it in person? Breakdown. It's just horrible. Every time I go up, the last time I went up I didn't cry, but I cried in the night, I miss my plants, my rhodiots, and my hydrangeas, and my garden is gone. All the things that made me happy.
About 8 to 10 people came out for 2 consecutive half days and sifted the best they could. And I really thought they would come up with more. They did come up with a few things. They came up with the pieces of my axes, and down at the smaller house, they found Amber's ring. That was very sentimental. A tiny ring in the ashes. And it was dear to her because our son Dana had given it to her on the first anniversary of them being together as a couple. It was a little gold ring with a couple of diamonds. They were about ready to give up and call it a day when the guy who found it saw this little twinkle, this little sparkle through the ashes, and picked up this ring.
So I actually thought I would just go down there and sift through everything and spend just hours up there. And I ended up just walking around the property in a daze for a couple of hours. I mean, I did a little bit here and there, but the volunteer crews were already up the street helping people sift through their stuff. And at the end of the day, coming back down the hill, these 3 women saw me and said I looked like a deer in headlights. And they came over and they coddled me. And they hooked me up with the guys to come out the next day and meet me there. And they brought like 12 people who were sifting, and like 5 or 6 others came by just to talk to me throughout the day. So that was huge. We found some things, but nothing serviceable or anything, but some things that cue memories. There were some small things, but most stuff, even metal things, were melted. Even the steel was deformed. Everything just got super hot.
I went back again. It's been 3 times I've had to go to Big Basin to do things. The trailer just melted. There's a hulk. So if you think of a trailer, you know, the whole thing just all collapsed. It was so hot.
I lost everything. And I looked, but I couldn't find anything. And I didn't find my diamond or the gold. Yeah, I don't know. There's many the precious stuffs inside. And my family, right? And the family photo that my mother gave to me. Yeah. I brought it back from China. Yeah, the eye collection, the purses, 30 to 35 the purses, and many beautiful and all different, and some new and some old and some that my friends they gave to me. Yeah. But the purses, yeah, they're not important. Yeah, and the purses you buy them, right? And the money, but the family stuff. And yeah, that's the worst. Oh, but I collection the sunglasses and the good sunglasses, and they are all burnt. Yeah, and I had the jade and the diamond and the gold necklace with the earrings, and they are all gone. Yeah, but it's okay.
I felt guilty admitting to myself my thought that the universe had done us a favor by taking away a house that was much in need of repair, that we did not have time, energy, or money to accomplish. It was my home, and I miss my property. And many simple possessions, when they come to mind, I call it the grand purge. At a time in our life where we were consciously letting go of things, the universe stepped in to make decisions for us.
At our age and everything, be careful what you wish for because, you know,
something may clean it out for you, along with everything else you liked.
I think the things we miss most are artifacts, the artwork and the personal things from my parents, the things that remind you of the people that aren't around anymore, things from my grandmother's rocking chair.
So we lost all our home movies from when I was a kid all the way through to our kids growing up. There were things that just meant so much to me from a history perspective and in our lives perspective and a history of the planet perspective. They were almost like spiritual objects that were in my care. I had quite a mixture. I had about a dozen great prehistoric axes that were some of the finest examples that were 8,000 years old. I had at least 400 of the very finest arrowheads and spearheads that were all authenticated over the years and painstakingly found and purchased. And I figured we'll be able to sift those out, but the fire got so hot that everything was cracked into pieces, even the stone artifacts. I did manage to find the 2 halves of the axe that came from my grandparents' farm that they gave me when I was 7. I got interested because in Illinois, they showed me a shoebox full of all these arrowheads they'd found on their farmland as they farmed it over the years. And I just was fascinated, and I was their only grandkid that showed that kind of fascination. I had at least a dozen ceramic dogs that were 2,000 years old from these tombs in Mexico. They're called Colima dogs from Colima province. One of those actually survived. He's totally discolored, and there's a little chip out of this ear, and he really is an odd one. He's not the classic form like all the other ones that are gone, but he's cool.
How do you put a value on this old tin measuring cup that meant so much to you? Because when you were little and Mom made fudge, she would add water and add some of the boiling chocolate to it to see if it was done. And then you got to lick that chocolate off her finger. Or making cookies and packing it full of Crisco and then running it under hot water and watching that Crisco just zip out. Oh, little things like that. You think about, well, these were really precious to me, And you wake up in the middle of the night and you go, shit!
For weeks, we'd wake up in the morning and go, shit, that too?
I still do that too.
Yeah, that's still going on.
I realized afterwards that I got kind of funny with the things we replaced. I became absolutely obsessed with dining room tables. The dining room table that I got, I didn't want a brand new one. I wanted one that had been around, so I bought one that somebody had before.
He sewed a while back this beautiful red cloak for our daughter. It was really, really special.
It wasn't so much the stuff I lost, and I did lose a lot. Beautiful needle points from my great-great-grandfather, an old camel saddle. My dad was born in Turkey, so we had lots of things from our travels over there that I lost. My beautiful books that I had collected for years. A beautiful crocheted Afghan that my great-grandmother had made years ago. It had many colors with one thread, not thread, but one bit of purple. Just that much purple in it. And it just always made me think, why did you put that in there? It's so cool. And I always displayed it with the purple right there because it may just be this streak of difference. And anyway, I lost all sorts of things, but the thing that I lost was 15 years I had been working at Big Basin and living there almost all of that time. But I was the interpreter at Big Basin, and that's where I lived. And those are the people I knew and loved. And so, who am I? Where will I be? Where will I go? Where will I live? And what will my job be?
I'm not decided if I'm going to rebuild my house. I'm not sure because I have to wait to see what the insurance company will pay. And so then I hired the adjuster, and they are fighting with the insurance company for me and fighting a long time for more money.
So it works out, we were insured for about $280 a square foot on the main house, $108 a square foot on the smaller manufactured home. So rebuilding is up around $500–600 a square foot. So virtually everyone is underinsured, and a lot of people have given up and left already. And those that are trying to stick it out, it's going to take a long time. There's a lot of unknowns. They don't know which way to go in terms of rebuilding. Unless they got a bunch of money in the bank or something, it could be impossible to rebuild.
It was a really beautiful area, and It was a really nice house, and now it is all gone. And we're going to move back to Illinois, where we have some people and where our money can go a little farther towards buying a house. The thing I haven't said very much about at all is how incredibly angry I was about insurance companies. They advertise their plans and how they assure you that it was absolutely enough to rebuild and replace these things in case of some kind of emergency like this. And it's just wrong. They just lie.
We were assured it was a full replacement policy and would take care of us if we had a disaster. And when we ran the numbers, like the dollars per square foot were nowhere near what it would have cost even before the pandemic and you know, fires and everything. Like, it just wasn't even close. And you know, we complained, and they basically like stringing us along for a long time, and then said like, too bad.
I have so much anger for all of it. There are a few people in this universe who have earned my deep, abiding anger.
We're planning on rebuilding down there and probably selling at that point. That seems to be our best option right now. We're not very stuck to a plan. We're kind of stalled a little bit with the insurance company until we get the cleanup stuff done. But, you know, I have trauma from that first fire, and I have trauma specifically around dealing with the insurance company.
We are planning to return to our property and build a tiny house by 2023. Hopefully. Steve's an architect, and he's diligently computer drafting the home design that he's envisioned for years. The debris removal is done. The contractor has submitted his report, and the county has sent us 60 pages of checklists that show we're certified by environmental health for a building permit. As soon as one more person does a site check and we receive an email stating that that visit was successfully completed, we wait patiently.
We invited back local former BCFD firefighters to come back as support personnel here at the station. Donations of supplies kept pouring in. It was amazing, the generosity. Those who were support staff made everything else successful. Thank goodness we have an amazing fleet here of really nice equipment with all the right stuff on it that is specifically built to travel in our mountains. That's thanks to our townspeople right there. Some of our local loggers and tree companies helped to save many homes by using their skills in falling or cutting up trees that blocked roads. We never asked them to do anything, but miraculously, these huge trees had been sawed out of the way before we were heading out, or before we were trying to retreat out of areas where trees and fallen poles had blocked us. They were guardian angels for sure. There will be people who'll be angry or sad, but I hope they know we did our best. Some people are angry that they had to evacuate. Others are upset because their home was lost and their neighbors is standing. I get it. But I hope they don't choose to reflect that on the firefighters. Ultimately, I want everyone to know how much these firefighters care about this town. There wasn't a second that anybody here said, I think we need to go now. Several of our crew members lost a lot of the same stuff other people did, but everyone just stayed here, even the 3 firefighter families who lost their homes. I didn't used to be an emotional person. Now, sometimes when I drive out 236, I notice my cheeks are wet.
I've talked to a couple people whose homes we saved, but I try not to, you know, I wasn't doing it all for the glory. This is tied to the moment that I was in the space that I was in. And that to me, that was just the right thing to do, in the situation that I was put in. That's all I felt. I don't feel like anyone owes me anything. I would expect the same thing out of anyone else in that sense, you know? I fought the fire because it was the right thing to do. I grew up here, 45 years, and every street you go down, you know, I went to school with someone, I went to a party there, I had a friend from soccer, a girlfriend, right? A family friend. So it was personal in a sense, right?
Connections with family and friends have been abundant and appreciated. When Diane and Mary came to visit from out of town, Mary said, "I have a gift for you." Tears came to my eyes when I opened the first piece of pottery, and Mary announced, "There's 2 of everything, enough for you and Steve. Big plates, little plates, salad bowls, tumblers, as well as a platter and a serving bowl, all handcrafted by my sister-in-law on her potter's wheel. Everything is glazed in this luscious hot chocolate brown with hints of dark chocolate on the underside. The face of each piece is swerved in soft greens and touches of chartreuse, facets of gold. They make us smile. This most cherished gift."
A dear friend of mine right away set up a GoFundMe page, and so that was huge, especially with renting all those Airbnbs and the food for 6 people and everything. And we didn't have to worry about any of that because of the GoFundMe.
And people also directly sent us meals.
We would get just groceries left on our doorstep from those cool apps, food delivered from a taco place or something. And once we got here to Whitby, then people would ask for our address and send us new sheets. And there's that one woman who's helping so many people, and she gave me some really pretty dishes. Barbara.
Yeah.
Yeah. Somebody sent us some chai from the White Raven and a new bicycle.
Yeah, so I've had to take a couple of trips back down to deal with things. We just did normal bookings on Airbnb for the night. And all of those people, after they heard our story, one of them gave me $40 and some gas money. The Airbnb host was like, "Next time you come through, I'll give you half off." That sort of thing kept happening. I mean, we picked up and ran away, but we were very connected to the community over the internet and over the phone. And it was just amazing to me how the community came together and supported each other and are still supporting each other and getting each other water tanks and helping each other refill them so that they have water for the day, because they still don't have serviceable water connections.
Or like the Boulder Creek Rec Center, they're still giving us free food and stuff. And that's the part that I've had many days of crying, is leaving the community, and especially like this.
The next door neighbor, next to Kathy and Larry, we met them briefly as we were moving in, and you know, they knew we were fire victims, and somehow they got in contact with the people up in the Paradise area who knew what we were going through. And I don't know how this transpired. I never got to ask the lady, but within a week or 2, they handed Dana's family and Marge and I each an envelope with some cash and some gift cards that had come down from the Paradise people.
People were very, very generous, very generous. And that was really, really amazing, really touching. When we moved into Kathy and Larry's, people had bought us a microwave. We had pots and pans, we had cups and plates. I mean, we had everything we needed. Flowers and plants, quilts, just everything. Everybody was really, really kind. I bought 2 dressers for the bedroom. One we got over in Scotts Valley, and I think I paid $90 for it. And we picked it up. And when we got home, I got an email or a text or something, and she said, "When my husband came home, we talked about it, and we want to give you your money back."
The schools put together different things for the kids. They had different things set up at the high school to go and get some stuff done by different parents for some of the different kids' classrooms. Like, they put together all sorts of packages with books and toys and stuff and games. And I grew up in Morgan Hill, which is not crazy far. So people that I grew up with, they found out about it on Facebook and they gave us some things. And our synagogue has been very supportive and helpful in a lot of ways. There's a lot of people who have been really wonderful. But it doesn't buy me a house, not that I expected it to. I love this community, but I can't make this work.
Yeah, after the fire, and the restaurant open again, and I see my customer, and yeah, I forgot my sadness. Yeah, they are so nice, and sometimes, yeah, I feel that they are like a family. Somebody stole the money from me. They just grab the cash bank bag off the counter. I don't know. Yeah. As a customer, they came and helped me out. Yeah, and also, so after my house burned, then the customer, they started the GoFundMe for me. Yeah, and 16,000 or more. Yeah, and then after the money was stolen, and yeah, the customer again, 6,000. I just want to serve the community good. So yeah, then after the fire, I put the free food out. Because yeah, the people, they all evacuate, right? And some of them, the burnt house. And my house burned, but I have the restaurant. They have no food. And they have no kitchen, and they need the food, right? My parents, they teach me, I have the blood of the good heart and the kindness. I love the community, right? And yeah, we have the best community, right? So I appreciate everyone. Yeah, they are so good. So I feel so happy to be with this small town, because my friend, they live in the big city or the big town, like the Los Angeles or San Jose or San Francisco, and yeah, they cannot get this benefit, right? Because they don't know each other. So here, people are very nice, and yeah, I'm so appreciative. Yeah, I feel blessed to be with this community. Yeah, the blessed.
I intend to not have many material possessions going forward. I basically had everything that I wanted and really loved and enjoyed it and appreciated it. And there's no need to go there again. You know, this stuff is really living inside me, sort of in my memory, and I can picture each piece. And in view of what's happened, I don't need to engage in that again. And I'll enjoy these few pieces that I have that have this double history now.
It's definitely a weird mix of feeling that there's a little less safety in things. Like, if I have something, it doesn't mean I'll continue to have it, right? And also a sense that the things I have that do have sentimental value feel more valuable, maybe, than they did before.
I look back now and can say I went into a medium-sized to deep hole. I was pretty good about not showing that at all, but it's been a climb out to feel strong again about who I am and what I'm doing and how I can contribute. But for a long time it was hard, and it was the not knowing. I wasn't sure who I was, you know? I was always Susan Blake, interpreter, Big Basin, Redwood State Park. I'm separating emotionally from Big Basin, But it's like stretching out those mycelium, those roots, which are so deep. I just can't keep them in there in the way that they were, because it's just really hard. So it's easier for me to sort of separate some. I now write my title as Susan Blake Interpreter, Santa Cruz District, because I can't keep putting the big basin in. It's going to be a long time. And I'm getting older. I'm not going to be here for another 20 years or whatever. And it's going to be a long time before Big Basin is ready for an interpreter doing what I was doing. It's life lessons. And I think a lot of us had to learn to go with the flow. And that's what I'm learning, is to roll with it. Literally roll with it. The other day I was doing something in my trailer and I fell off the couch. And I purposefully went into a roll. And I popped up, and I'm fine.
It feels like we were being pushed around by the universe, you know, and pushed along, maybe. And it felt like we just needed to surrender. And we were just not going to make our plans. We were just going to follow up. Because since the fire, everything seems to be lining up for us. Other than we were running from fires. I don't know, it's a weird thing to say, but it definitely felt that way. So, we found an old couple here on Whidbey who had been backing off of their farm for the past couple of years. Farming has been an aspiration of ours for 15 plus years. So we leased the farm from them. We're doing a 50-50 split, and they're teaching us how to farm in the Pacific Northwest. And we're doing the lion's share of the labor for them this year. They're tickled to death, and we're tickled to death, and we're all gonna get fresh vegetables.
It's pretty cool right now for me because I grew up there my whole life. And right now where we live, the road in the Big Basin is closed. So you gotta think, 5 o'clock comes and the construction crews leave and there's not one person out there. It's surreal. There is not one person out there. It's crazy. It's amazing. I actually went up to the top of Eagle Rock and we hiked down the ridge top that's never been walked, that's never been seen. That's been covered for hundreds of years. It was so cool. I mean, you can see everything. And we found, and it was super cool. I call it the Indian Throne, and it overlooks all of Big Basin, all the way out to the ocean.
Time for everything, there's time for everything. Time for everything, but everything takes time. Jose came here from Mexico. He earned a taco truck and that taquero brought loaves and fishes east of Chico to our deadliest fire. He drove into evacuation camps, looked around at the faces, and he said, fire up the grill, tear up the bill, we'll feed them all in time. Time for everything, time for everything, time for everything, but everything takes time. Time for everything, time for everything, time for everything, but everything He sees Margaret on her porch and says, we're